Okay, hello, it's Paul Green here from the business community, doing another one of our regular Spotlight On, where we get to find a little bit about the business journey of a particular individual, and that particular individual is Mark Costa from Pixooma. Good morning, Mark.
Morning.
So we're just going to pick his brains and find out what makes him tick, and then later on he's going to share some top tips from his experience. So Mark, do you want to introduce yourself to start off with and let people know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me above the fan running on my computer, which has been playing up this morning, and now it's deciding to run at 1,000 revs. My name is Mark Costa. I'm from Pixooma, experienced graphic designers. I've been running Pixooma now for 7 years, since 2014, and do everything to do with graphic design. So that could be anything really that I tend to say to people, anything that's sort of printed flat or on a screen, we can probably help with. But we tend to do a lot of branding and logos and design for print. And I've got a lot of history of doing magazines as well. Obviously, we can also do infographics and exhibition materials and websites and that sort of thing as well.
Okay, excellent. So you said you started Pixooma in 2014. So what was the journey that led you there, and what had you make that leap of faith in that year?
I think I've always wanted to work on my own, start my own business. Really, not entirely sure how I was going to do it, or what I was going to do, but I think it was in my mind for decades probably. I had a few aborted attempts of trying to do something, and it didn't quite work, and I was sort of a bit half-assed ways of doing things. And then around 2012, 2013, I think I started, well, I'll do this properly, let's do this properly. And I started putting the brand of Pixooma together, set up my first own website, and started networking through connection with joining the FSB initially. And I felt that it was working quite well. While I was doing that, I was working full time. I had a plan. I'm generally quite a cautious person, to say the least. So I had a plan of a couple of years of building up client work on the side, and doing that in small hours and all that sort of thing into the night. I was warned that would send me mad, and I think they were probably right if it had gone down that track, to be honest. So what I did in the end was I'd been networking for about a year, had some confidence in what I was doing, and then I had a really bad week at work, IT issues, all sorts of things, and I'd started to see sort of control from my side. And I thought, why can't we just do this? Why can't we just do that? I was getting frustrated with stuff. And I put the word out I wanted to get 3 days a week for sort of a 9 months maternity cover or something like that. That'd give me a bit of space. What actually happened was it was a 3 month, 40 hours a week, permanent, full-time contract at Barclaycard. Being a studio manager, I can't remember, it's about 7 or 8 people, never actually been doing any management before. So it was a real leap, but it gave me a lot of experience in that side of things, and most importantly, really, at the point at which I decided to leave employment, my partner Jo, she just supported me on that and said, because obviously I had my doubts, should I do it or should I not? And she just said, well, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? So it's got all this experience you've built up, and you're not you've still got plenty of time to do this and build something out of it. So her support was key, and did the contract. They extended it a little bit, and then I started Pixooma properly from that point, really, and took on clients slowly over time.
Okay, so I ask people on these calls, what's your why? What sort of gets you out of bed each morning and drives you to fight the good fight? So what would you say is your why?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I'd like to thank Jackie Sherman for helping in this side of things, because there's a coaching system for working with finding your why, because I think it's quite tricky to look at it from the inside out. But through doing so, it made me realize a few things, and I'd always known from a young age that I sort of like to do problem solving, and also found that I realized that I'd always tried to do things, especially mundane tasks, really more efficiently. Now, some would probably call this working smarter, not harder, but I like to think of it as a practical sort of laziness, really. Why expend more energy than needed to get the best result? And my earliest memory of that is when I was about, I don't know, about 7 or 8. I'm not entirely sure. My memory for those sort of things is not great. But we was around at my dad's aunt's house because the patio had flooded for some reason. We were trying to sort of clean it out with bowls and buckets and whatever else. And my dad at one point just turned to me and said, well, you're good at this sort of thing. Can you come up with a better system of doing this, more efficient? And I remember feeling quite proud at that point that, you know, he was looking to me for help. I was only, like I say, 6 or 7 years old or whatever. But he'd recognized something in me that I hadn't at that point, which was that I was a sort of creative problem solver. I've been doing this stuff. And I do love solving all sorts of challenges for myself, but solving problems for other people is even better because that's a win-win situation. They get a solution they love. I get to get all these feel-good chemicals of being able to help them, and I've solved something at the same time. And it just so happens that problem solving is a great skill to have in design generally. My degree was in industrial design, which is a discipline that mixes sort of creative with technical. And so it's a great proving ground for graphic design. Because as I say, I always say that it's all graphic design is not about making something look pretty. It's about making it work. So that helping other people is still a solving a challenge thing for me, but it's they're getting something out of it, and now I'm getting to help them. That makes me feel good as well.
Okay, so you touched on networking. You're quite a prolific network, I think it's safe to say. So how important has that been for your journey, would you say?
I think it's been vitally important, really. When people ask me about networking, or does this networking group or that group work, fundamentally they're always asking, really, is it bringing any money in? Which obviously is important, and it has been critical for my business in bringing in that clients and client work and money. But it's also about the advice and support and the expertise that is available, and the fact that I can put my versions of that back in as well. And actually, I tend to talk about it. Informal networking has been a key part for me as well. You know, I've got clients who are ex-colleagues from previous industries, previous employments, where you know, I've done what I do in networking, which is try and be helpful, do the right thing, and provide good quality work, and that's been remembered. So it carries on. It's not a formal networking in that sense, but it's all part of the same thing. And I think the formal networking has been the backbone of my business for many years.
Okay, and you've fairly recently set up your own little networking group. Do you want to say a little bit about what that's about, and what the intention of that is?
Yeah, it started as a LinkedIn group, the Pixooma creative community. Just wanted to experiment with the sort of group side of things. So it's for anybody who's in a creative industry or has a creative role in another industry. And it's about sharing knowledge, you know, sort of networking again on a virtual basis, sharing knowledge and sharing advice, that sort of thing, supporting each other. But we also, quite early days, started an actual meeting, a Zoom meeting, and we do that once a month as well. And again, it's just the people. What I find is quite interesting is that there is a school of thought with some people in terms of networking is that they don't want to network with other people in the same industry. There's a risk, and you know, it's competition, etc., etc. It's a bit of a facetious statement from me, but I always say I don't believe in competition. There's always room for collaboration, all sorts of things. And the Pixooma Creative Community meetings have proven that. You know, we sometimes have several photographers or several copywriters, and everyone says how much they enjoy that. Talking to people in the same industry, the people who understand the problems that they have, and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's worked quite nicely.
Okay, you've got someone who'd like to come along to that. So if you want to get in touch with,
Jamie, yeah, absolutely.
Jamie,
yeah.
know how he can join in.
Yeah.
Glad I brought it up there. So, what was it? I think that's absolutely right. I think, it is good sort of like bounce off. Let's call them competitors for now. Like you say, I know you've collaborated with other graphic designers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think it's worthwhile doing that. I mean, my industry is the electronics industry, and we used to network our trade events with our competitors and share war stories and stuff like that. So I think it's always useful to bring similar minds together. And just sort of like see what can come of it. So no, good idea, very good idea. So we mentioned competitors. There are other people out there doing similar things to you. What would you say distinguishes you from the competition? Why should someone choose you over any other graphic designer out there? What's your edge?
Yeah, there's a few things potentially there. I think other people have mentioned to me that they recognise that I'm always looking onwards to the next improvement that I can make, either systems and processes that save me time or get a better result or more efficient, all of which benefits my customers in the long term anyway, because I'm more organised in that sense. And I think I'm quite good with the project management side of things, which not every creative person is. I think there's also areas where I directly try and improve the way that I work with my customers as well. I'm always looking for new angles to sort of improve things. One example is the client portal system I'm setting up on my website currently. So all my clients are going to get a portal where all of their invoices, all of their previous work, all the stock images we've licensed for them are all in one place. And I don't think, my guess is that you have to get to quite a large agency size, physical agency size, before you get that sort of thing from most. And I don't think it's unique to me exactly, but I don't think all agencies and freelancers necessarily challenge their customers enough. One of the key Pixooma principles from my website is putting my customers first. So I'll ask them why they think they need something. And if I don't think it's a good idea, then I potentially will I'll tell them so, even if that's potential that I lose the project. In fact, actually recently had a client who wanted me to do a particular project, and I queried with them about what was involved, and I didn't think they were going to get the outcome they thought they were going to do, because there's more complications involved. And so I felt they were going to be wasting their money. So basically, it didn't sort of turn it down, but I just said, are you sure you want to do this? And it gave them food for thought, and they've gone away and thought about it. So that project's on hold. It may not happen. But I think it's important to point that out rather than just take somebody's money. And it's that ethics side of thing, I think, that is, again, not necessarily unique, but I think I have a strong set of ethics for stuff of how to treat my customers. I've got there's a couple of quick stories about that. One is I met a print broker many years ago. The first time I met him, and he told me quite proudly how he had been approached to do a website for his client for some reason, and he purchased a WordPress theme for a couple £100 or less, charged them a couple of grand, made out that he had written created the whole website for them, and he was really pleased about that. And I thought that was a terrible thing to be doing. And so as a comparison to that, during the pandemic, I reviewed one of the retainers for one of my clients, and realized that most of the work had been covered already. So I just voluntarily gave them a month for free and voluntarily halved their subscription from that point forward. I just feel that, I believe in establishing long-term relationships, and you can't do that if you're ripping people off in the short term or trying to get the short-term gain, like the print broker guy that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's about fairness, isn't it? It's about doing the right thing. And that's going to, add to your credibility, particularly with that client. And then, hopefully telling the story, it gives people an idea of, what you're about. I mean, the client portal is a great godsend, because it'll save calls from me asking you to send me artwork because I can't remember where I've filed it. At least now I've got one place to go, and it's all going to be under there. So it's going to save you a lot of time as well. So no, that's a really
yeah. I mean, it's a win-win. I'm always looking for those win-win situations, really. Yeah, something where there are occasions where, more often than not, it was logos. So I do something logo for somebody, then I give them all the files they need, all the versions and that sort of stuff. But then they might not think about needing a white version logo, or somebody might ask them for an EPS 2 years later, and they might say to me, "Oh, have you got that and I've already sent it to them, which is fine. But now I can just say, well, it's on your portal.
Yeah.
More actually, I hope that they'd realise that's where it is, and they might go there. Of course, I'm still going to get those inquiries, and I'll still send them the stuff. It's no problem. But I think by having some central point, I think makes more sense, and it's more useful for them and helpful for me as well.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. No, hopefully that'll be a great addition, another sort of like edge you've got. Because as you said, yeah, it might be something that bigger agencies do, but I'm not aware of the smaller design agencies that offer that sort of facility. So yeah, good luck with that. So we're still in the pandemic, hopefully with light at the end of the tunnel, where we can get back to whatever normal looks like. So that's obviously been the biggest challenge, I guess, for most businesses in the last year or so. Outside of that, Mark, what would you say has been the biggest challenge for your business since you started?
I think everything's a challenge, frankly. The whole idea is that it's a continuing challenge with different things. But I suppose I was thinking about achieving some level of financial stability, I think, and predictability has been hard work. That's a big challenge to get to that point. I love running my own business. But in all honesty, I'm not quite where I would have hoped to be perhaps at this stage. But then I think probably because I was perhaps a bit unrealistic about how much hard work it was to build to this stage already. And I have to look back at all the stuff that we have achieved. And we have a level of financial stability and predictability. And the only income into the house comes through Pixooma. So it's that I'm particularly proud of. But it's hard work. Getting to that point, you have to do a lot of the right things for a long time, and it builds up. And I'm proud that we've managed to come through this so far, this pandemic, relatively unscathed because of that, which I think is something to be proud of as well. Although, I have said a lot of it has to do with luck and timing. There are some people in some very poorly affected business sectors, which I'm lucky not to be in. But I think there is also the work I've done to get to this point, building a stable business, getting a good reputation, having a good bank of reliable and good clients who pay well and pay on time and appreciate what we're doing and keep coming back. This has helped. This has all been helped enormously by all the networking. Obviously, I do a lot of stuff through the business community, and that's been a huge part of that as well. And of course, from the advice that you've given me over the years as my coach as well, of course.
Checks in the post, Mark. It's funny, I've just finished reading a book called Business for Punks, which is by one of the co-founders of the Brewdog Brewery.
Right, yeah.
It's quite interesting. And one of the things that he basically dismisses is taking advice from people, that their premise has been, well, let's just do it ourselves, cross those bridges when we come to it, work it out ourselves. You don't need a business coach, you don't need this, that, and the other. Also, that they're not a big fan of business plans. They think they could be a waste of time, putting things. So it's quite an interesting. Some of it is I agree with, but it's quite interesting their viewpoint and some of the radical things they've done in their business. And you can't fault it. It's gone from 0 to I think sort of 50 million turnover in 20 years or something. Whenever they were founded, so there's obviously something they're doing right.
It is. I don't think there's a bit of hindsight with these things, isn't there? They could have easily made all those decisions and never been heard of. You
never know. I guess other businesses like that could have gone the other way. You got a bit of a fan that's just popped up there.
Thanks, Paul.
Paul Beasley, so you better send him a check as well. Thanks.
I better do, yeah.
So we're reviewing the Brewdog book at one of the business book clubs that I go to tonight. So I'm interested to see what people's views on that. I think one of the chaps, which I didn't particularly like, sort of said networking is for fools. So that's another thing that they don't believe in either. So
I think on that point, I think there's room for plans and there's room for advice. And I think if you've got no plans, then you don't know where you're going and what you're doing. You can have plans and decide to ignore parts of them and carry on doing other things and test stuff in different ways. And I think you can decide to ignore advice, but I think it's advisable to have it. It's a bit like, I think with the advice side of things, if you ask too many people, you just get too many opinions. And then you've got a problem of trying to work out which one to go for. But I think having advice, probably, even if you contradict it and think, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't believe in that, it doesn't fit with my philosophy. I think that's equally beneficial from getting something that challenges you, or you challenge, as the stuff that that is in line with what you think anyway.
Yeah, it's worth reading the book. Actually, they've done some interesting things. Quite radical. I didn't realise that they drove a Russian tank through London to promote one particular beer. They projected an image of two founders naked onto the House of Parliament. All of this without permission, and have done various other things, without permission. They built 6 massive. I'm not sure what you call them, whatever you brew beer in. They just built those onto the building they had without getting planning permission for that. So they're quite wild in their approach, and it seems to have paid off to them most times. But yeah, worth a read. Anyway, we digress. So you were going to share some top tips for us. So if you're happy to do that, I'll just put you into solo and just hand the floor over to you, Mark, and see you back on the other side in about 3 or 4 minutes with a bit of luck.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to talk about logos and the importance of logos. I think it's easy to see a logo as just this little symbol thing that is on your business cards and stuff like that. But the reality is, it's much more important than that. You only have to look at the likes of Apple, Microsoft, Ryanair, McDonald's to see that people have a strong emotional connection, good and bad, to all sorts of brands. And this connection is fired off when you see the logo. That's the connection you make. It's the keystone of the brand. It holds it all together. Now, it shouldn't really be that important. It's just some text or an image or a combination, but it does mean so much more as emotional connections. So I just want to talk about the 5 things that your logo should be. Most important of all, number 1, is it should be a vector. Now, there are 2 basic file types when it comes to imagery. You've got bitmaps and vectors. Bitmaps are the stuff that's familiar. That's the photographs and things like that, which are made up of pixels or dots. The more dots per inch in the space, the higher the quality of the image. So if you compare between a newspaper image and a high quality glossy magazine image, that you can see the dots much more easily on the newspaper. But the problem is, it doesn't matter how high res your image is. Eventually, if you blow it up to a certain size, it's going to pixelate and blur, and the quality is going to fall. So vector files, on the other hand, are made of maths. They're really just a set of instructions for creating all the shapes and coded instructions for drawing each line and the curves. The end result is that they can be scaled to any size, and they will remain perfectly sharp. Now, that means they're perfect for logos, illustrations, infographics, that sort of thing. You can't do photographs with it, so that they're only suitable for certain things, but they are perfect for that sort of stuff. And it means that it's going to be much more versatile. So, second thing is, your logo realistically should be simple. If you look at the big brands, they really do simplify their logos right down. And a simple logo is much more likely to reproduce well, no matter what size or medium. It should work in black and white, and ideally, in my view, it should be designed in black and white initially. And a simple logo is easier to remember, easier to associate with, becomes more memorable, and you don't have so many other technical problems with it at certain sizes. Third thing it should be is appropriate. So that doesn't mean you have to say what you do. In fact, mostly it's better not to do that. It gets complicated, but it does need to be appropriate. You don't want to look like a small arts and craft company if you're a global finance corporate, and vice versa. Number 4, it should be enduring. So some logos of very established brands haven't changed in decades or at all. Many have become simpler over time because it makes sense to do so, but they've just tweaked it, they've evolved it. So if you take a look at Shell, for example, they started off with a photograph of a shell, which would have its own problems. But once they created this simple shell graphic, this image, they stuck with it for the best part of 60 years. They've tweaked it here and there, but it is recognizable from the original. And this also relates to the idea that you don't have to say, or generally not a good idea, to have a logo that says what you do unless it can be done simply and cleanly. They don't sell shells. It's got no relation to, as far as I'm aware, to what they do at all. And your logo won't endure if you have to completely redesign it every time you expand your business in a different direction or add a new service. And finally, number 5, versatile. So this is where the vector file comes in. This is where the simplicity comes in. It should work as an embroidered logo. It should work as a tiny web icon. It should work on a huge billboard. And simplicity and the vector file will help you get this, make it work in all these different environments. So the 5 things are: a vector file is the most important. Keep it simple. Make sure it's appropriate. Should be an enduring thing, should be changing every 5 minutes, and it should be versatile. And if you're not convinced the bad logo could affect your business, I would suggest just doing a Google search for logo design fails or bad logo design. You'll get some absolute howlers.
Okay, good advice there. I think you know my logo story way back when I started, and I just sort of needed something. Went to one of these online things where you pay whatever it is, $20 or something like that. Found this logo, you did a little bit of editing yourself and then download it. And then, got the business cards done or whatever and started using it on the website. Then went to an exhibition, looked at to the end of the room, and there's my logo, inverted commas, on someone else's banner. So, it just, of all the thousands of logos that either of us could have chosen, we both happened to be in Northamptonshire choosing the same logo. And because this particular business has got to pull up banners with it all on and stuff like that, then I sort of had to yield and go away from it. So there's pitfalls if you try and do it yourself, I think. So it's worth, I think, investing in somebody like you to do it properly. And you have, you see part of the logo on the screen at the moment, which is just a little icon for what we did for the business community. So so finally, Mark, given your experience, what's one top tip that you'd give to any other business owner out there if you could sort of pick one? Yeah,
it would be consistency for me. This applies in a general marketing sense. So don't do something now and then stop, or do it for a few months and then there'll be a huge gap before you do it again. So that's blogging and all that sort of thing, or any other marketing activity that just do a bit of it and stop. Don't keep changing what you're doing, constantly chopping and changing. People can't keep up. But it also applies in a design sense. Be consistent with your choice of images, the style of the images, the tone of voice that you use in your written materials, the colors they use, the way you use them, the way you use your logo, the structure of all the materials, the spacing, the grids that you use, the layouts. Obviously, be consistently good with all this. Don't use consistently cheap and shoddy images, or use consistently bad design. But be consistent is the main thing, I think, because if you can build a recognizable brand using a consistent and recognizable visual style, that works much better. Consistency makes people comfortable, I think, and this builds trust. If they're confused by your marketing materials and the message you put out, because it's constantly changing, then they're less likely to see you as someone who can help them, I think.
Yeah, sound advice makes absolute sense. So thanks for that. So you please know your ordeal is done here. So thanks for your time this morning. I'll crack on with the rest of your day and rest of your week. So thanks for joining me, Mark.
No problem. Thank you.